All right, so thank you guys so much for coming. Today we're going to talk about how to do resumes and cover letters for research positions. I am the workshop coordinator for Assure. My name is Tilly, and we also have with us our fantastic peer mentor, Julissa.
Hi, everyone.
Julissa is going to talk about resumes, and she's going to lead our question and answer session, and you guys should definitely go see her for peer mentoring after the workshop. She's fantastic. So by the end of this workshop, you'll understand how to put together a resume and cover letter, and you'll know how to use it in a research setting to get research positions at the U of O. And you'll know how to put one together to apply for research positions. So when we think about resumes and cover letters, we often think about creating them for your employer and that they're like this thing that you have to do. It's a chore. But really, I think your resumes and cover letters, there's a lot that they can do for you. They let you reflect and think about what you've done and what your experiences have taught you. And they help you organize for things that you're going to do later, like interviews. And when you go to write your cover letter, your resume is really, it's a useful thing to have when you're drafting, so you can kind of see your experiences and make a story, which we're going to talk about today. So first we're going to talk about resumes. A quick note on resumes versus CVs. A lot of people talk about resumes versus CVs, and I don't think that that distinction is super important at this stage. I think that it's only this term, and I'm a senior, that I'm like, oh, okay, I think I have a little bit more, and now I have a CV and a resume. But just so you know, a resume is kind of the CV is the collection of like everything that you've done in your life and your academic achievements, and the resume is a little bit more targeted for the job that you're applying for. But don't feel like your resume has to be very, very long. We're going to talk about how to make it full of good content, and that's much more important. So you can see here the basic building blocks for a resume, and we're going to talk about that, and Julissa is going to go through that, and I bet you guys are pretty familiar with it. First, I think that, you guys are college students, and when I was a freshman and probably throughout most of my years at the University of Oregon, I was like, what do I put on my resume? And I didn't feel like I had a lot of stuff. And so it's important to know that you don't have to fill your resume. It doesn't have to be a long list of things. The content of your resume is what's important. And when you go to apply for research positions, PIs, principal investigators, or professors, they're not super interested in like you having gone to the moon. They're interested in you having the critical thought and creativity and personal awareness to describe your experiences and say what you've learned from them. That's important. So now I'm going to turn it over to Julissa, and you're going to help Puddles draft a resume.
Yes, let's do this. I'm sorry no one could actually see me, but it's a little weird online. So let's do this. So
can you see the resume?
No, I can't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me restart the share.
No worries.
Can you see the resume now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so can everyone see Puddles' resume?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so this is Puddles' first draft at his resume. And as you can see, you've got, oh, you can't see my mouse, can you?
No.
Okay, no worries. So as you can see, he's got his name on top. He's got skills, experiences, education, objectives, some handles, and volunteer experience or leadership. And so can anyone tell me if something here looks a little off, or if something is just sticking out to them that maybe doesn't seem right? Anyone think that maybe the TikTok handle might not be relevant for a job? Yeah, so Sydney agrees. So We've got a few things that could probably be kicked out, you know, such as the TikTok handle. Definitely Puddles, his uoregon.edu email is going to stay, but that TikTok handle could be jumped out. And then LinkedIn, which is at the Oregon Duck, could also be it could also stay for sure. And so if you could read, so the objective, it says to participate in the Richmond lab as an undergrad research assistant, studying the properties of water, specifically in the molecular basis of water properties. I think this is a really good starting point for a resume, but an objective such as this one, where it's very impersonal, could be switched around. So it could be a little bit more puddle-like and less, you know, boxy and square. Does anyone have any questions or anything that they think could be revised on this one? You could throw it in the chat. You could just unmute yourself.
Like maybe if it was formatted so like the email didn't split onto the next line, like I don't know, just to make it look a little bit better.
Yeah, totally. Formatting is key, right? And also, talking about formats, the color is kind of bright. It's kind of like just stark right there. So yeah, that was awesome, Ryan. Thank you. And so if you could see the skills, just kind of like he just kind of like threw his skills out there. You know, good at public speaking, good at team-based exercises. We want the resume to look well organized, but also very well rounded, and it's gonna explain yourself rather than just throwing you know, like bullet points out there. And did you want to switch now, Tilly? Or, oh, we got one more in the chat. Remove I from experienced and volunteer. Yeah, totally. So Alice, we're gonna see that Puddles will revise the resume. Yep, so here is the new resume that Puddles fixed. And so yeah, so Alice, so you said removing I from experience and volunteer. So basically what you want to do is make sure that you have more of like less less standardized, more personal sort of feel. And so what Puddles did was, for his mission statement up at the top here, rather than stating just straightforwardly, I want to do this, I want to be in your lab, blah, 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 he put, you know, I'm interested in joining your lab because blah, 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 because I like the sciences, and I like what you research, and this is my, you know, my credentials. And so I think it's really key to put what courses you're currently in. And so Puddles, as you can see right here, Puddles said, I'm currently enrolled in the following sequences, which shows that he's in applicable sequences for the lab that he wants to be in. And so this is really key for your employer or for your lab PI that you want to work for, because it shows that you could bring something to the table, but also just know that it's totally not needed to be in the same field that you're that you want to research in. That's definitely just a plus. And then yeah, that's a tangent. But for the education, you could see that everything's basically the same. The GPA is something that you don't need to put, but it's recommended to put. I mean, it's not like gonna hurt you, it's not gonna help or anything. I mean it might help, but like it's not needed per se. Your major, if you're undeclared, that's totally fine. If you're a declared major for something, go ahead and put that there. It definitely isn't gonna hurt. So for the experiences, Puddles wrote his statements very personally, and he made sure to put a lot of effort into explaining what he does per each experience. And I think this is pretty important because it shows that you're a person behind the paper, and that, you know, you're like at the end of the day that you're a person and not just an applicant. So yeah, does anyone have any ideas that they think maybe Puddles could even do better, or something that they saw that they like?
I guess it's probably good that when he was describing what he did within each job, he explained what type of skill sets he utilized during those jobs.
Yeah, totally. The skill sets for sure. And then your Tilly will get more into this, but your cover letter will also benefit that aspect, because you could build up on, the things that you've learned through your experiences that you wrote on your resume, and then you could expand on those in your cover letter. So totally agree. Does anyone else have any additions or things that they felt could be improved or that they like? Does anyone like the format change? Yeah, I think, coming from the perspective of seeing both formats, I think this one looks a little bit more put together. The yellow one looked a little bit, exactly. The yellow looks, it's like a, I guess high school basis. This one looks more professional, easier to read, easier on the eyes regarding the colors. So yeah, very good, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much for your participation. And I think that Julissa touched on a lot of great points, and you guys did a great job with that. And so your resume, I like how Julissa said, you're a person behind the paper. If you're going to do an objective statement, which is like what you want to do, why you're applying for the job, or a skills statement, which is you go a little bit more in depth on the skill set that you have, that you think is applicable to the job and makes you a good fit. You don't want to, it's a kind of a tease for your cover letter. You give a little bit of an overview about why you think you're a good fit, and then you go into more detail in the cover letter. And we're also going to talk about how to break down describing your experiences in a way that's informative, and it shows that you've thought about what you've learned. And I think that's a great point that you guys touched on. Formatting is not everything. It's much more important what you've got written down. All right, so when you're describing your experiences, you want to make sure you make it personal, like we talked about. And it's much more important what you learned from your experiences and not what you did. It's not about listing things. And so, of course, you want to have basics like dates, company, and position title. But when you're writing your experiences structure, you want to go small picture to big picture. For me, a structure that works really well is what's on the slide. First, describe the experience in one sentence, like, I worked as a Grubhub driver from this date to this date. Second sentence, expand if needed. What were your responsibilities on that job? And what did you do every day? And then you want to go to the more big picture thing and what you learned, and what you learned from the job, or maybe what you learned about yourself. And so we see that Puddles did this well when he was describing his Grubhub experience. We see clearly that structure, and I think it blends pretty well. This is something that's worked very well for me in my resumes. And you don't have to stick with that structure strictly. Make it your own too. So when we're writing resumes and cover letters, I think that a lot of people, me included, feel like writing down our accomplishments feels like boasting. But you can describe your accomplishments and be proud of them, and describe them in a way that makes it more like, this is why I'm a good fit, instead of this is why I'm so fantastic. And again, there's going to be more, there's not one resume. I think Julissa touched on that, that you're going to have, and it's going to be perfect for every job. The resume is about describing why you're a good fit with your experiences that you've had. And so when you go to make your resume, it can seem overwhelming, in part because you might not know what you've done. And that sounds silly, but I definitely did not know what I had done when I had went to write down my experiences in my first college resume. And so it's a really good idea to develop a habit of keeping track of your experiences during college. I would say do it at the end of every term. and just have a document. It doesn't have to be super formal. Maybe a journal format works for you. Jobs that you've worked, awards that you've gotten, projects that you've worked on. If you already work in a lab and you worked on a specific project, write down what you did on that project and what you learned from what you did. Any challenges that you faced that term that you were able to overcome. That's something that employers ask about in interviews, and it's often essay questions for applications to grad school and for jobs. And so writing down the challenges that you face and that you would feel comfortable talking about in a context like that is a really great idea. And you also want to write down some salient professional interactions that you've had with like people on your team or maybe your mentor, because that's something that you will probably also be asked about in job interviews during college and after college, how you work on teams, what's an example of that. And so it's a good idea to keep track of those interactions and what you learned from them. Also, it sounds simple, but it is important. I would write down the dates that you started and ended working jobs. When I went to apply for other positions, I had worked in a lab for years and years. And I was like, I have no idea what date I started working in the lab. And I have to dig through my email to find the date I started. So save yourself that hassle and write down the dates. And I'll share the slides at the end of the presentation in a PDF. This is a good resource, this link, for what to keep track of and how to keep track of your resume. So again, we've talked about it. You don't feel like you have to pack your resume and don't overshare. People say that a lot and I'm not sure what they're referring to, but keep it professional. Don't put irrelevant things just because you feel like you don't have enough, because you do. And going to one of our peer mentors, which Julissa is going to talk about, is a great way to flush out if you feel like you don't have experiences. Go talk to a peer mentor about what you've done and what you can put down on your resume, because you do have a lot already. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and talk about cover letters. So Puddles has decided he's been spending a lot of time in the sports arena and he'd like to spend some time in a lab. So he is applying to work with Dr. Geraldine Richmond in the chemistry department. She researches water. This is a real person. And so here's Puddles' first try at a cover letter. Hi, Geraldine. I'd like to be an RA in your lab. I learned valuable lessons from my volunteer and work experience. See resume. I'm also taking chemistry and biology this year, so it'd be cool to do some chemistry in the lab setting too. Thanks, Puddles the duck. How do you guys think Puddles can improve on this cover letter? We can start at the top. Does anybody have any suggestions on how to improve the greeting or the rest of the cover letter?
Use her title.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Hi, Dr. Richmond is much better. Anybody else?
Probably don't say things like it'd be cool.
Yeah. Language is important. The code that you use. Other things that you guys see? So I think that Puddles could also go into his work experience, because the resume does not say it all. Like we talked about, it's just kind of a tease for what you're going to say in your cover letter. So Puddles seems to kind of have the basic structure. He's got an opening, he's got a body, kind of, and he's got a closing, and that's a good place to start. But we're going to expand on that. So the cover letter adds color to your narrative and your resume, and you want to make sure you kind of have a story about what you've done. So the anatomy of the cover letter, I like to structure my cover letters kind of like a 5-paragraph essay that you learned in high school, but with fewer paragraphs for sure. So first, you've got an introduction. You've got a hook and a thesis statement. The hook you open a cover letter with something like, I am writing to apply to this job because blah, blah, blah. I like to add like a good adjective or verb, like I'd be excited to work at your company because ABC, instead of just I'm applying. And the first sentence is a good first impression. And so having a more dynamic opener is good. And then you want to give one sentence or two sentences that describes why you think you're a good fit. And it's just kind of like the thesis statement in a 5-paragraph essay that you only need to give, I think, 1 or 2 good reasons. And then you have the body, where you describe your skills and experiences, and most importantly, what you learned from them. And then you've got a closer. Like the introduction, it's good to mix the closer up and have more dynamic adjectives or verbs. And when you go to the closer, you want to go to a big picture about why you're a good fit. And so when you're writing the cover letter, again, it's a lot about fit and not so much about your experiences. Your experiences help you become a good fit. And of course, end with thank you. So Puddles has incorporated your guys' suggestions. And he's got a cover letter that's got a pretty clear structure. He's got an intro, he's got a great greeting, and he's got 2 body paragraphs that describe what he learned from his volunteer and his work experiences. And he's got a pretty big picture closer, and he says why he's interested in working with this researcher in her lab on her project. And he kind of has a closer that looks forward to the future. I hope to put my knowledge to work. And he ends with a very polite thank you for your consideration. And so I think that writing cover letters can be pretty intimidating, but it's important to know. I think when I wrote my first cover letter, it was really bad. Like all first drafts are kind of terrible. One of my favorite writers, she has a TED Talk and she says, the difference between great writers and people who don't become great writers is that they just keep their butt in the chair because everybody writes bad first drafts. So first write a bad draft of your cover letter and then go through and pick out the sentences that you're like, that's a good sentence or that's a good idea, and pick those and go from there. And your cover letter, it doesn't have to be really long. I think a page is like, that's enough. And it might take some time to edit your cover letter down to a page. I love a quote by Mark Twain. It's, I didn't have a time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one instead. Editing takes time, and I think it's perhaps the most important part of the writing process. And so after you've written your cover letter and you've picked out the great ideas, edit it down so you've got what you need and it's easy to read. And so for me, it was uncomfortable writing my first cover letter because I was like, I feel like I'm boasting about myself. So what I do when I write my cover letters and resume now is I think, how would I write a cover letter or resume for a dear friend that had my accomplishments? And so it does kind of feel like I'm just inhabiting the body of someone that has a good resume when I'm writing my resume and cover letter, and that helps me. Because you do want to sell yourself and be kind to yourself when you're doing it. And I'm going to turn it over to Jalissa to talk about it, sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Tilly. So basically, Assure is a student-run organization that's ran by students for students. And we implement office hours and workshops and like classroom visits online. And but a big publicized event is the Undergraduate Research Symposium, and that is going to take place in the spring. And it usually takes place in the spring, not virtually, but this year it will be virtual. And so that's basically the biggest event that we will hold. And it's basically an opportunity for students to show their hard work and their research that they've done throughout the year. And they present it to other students or faculty, staff, basically everyone. It's not judged. It's just an opportunity to get your research out there and to have an experience of formatting a poster, presenting, public speaking. There's a whole bunch of different things that you could add to your resume, plug for this workshop. And that's like a huge part of what employers want you to have, under your belt, either before or after you join their lab or join their work or, office. So it's a really amazing opportunity. And we're basically a student-run organization to help you get an opportunity such as the research symposium. Also, this is my cat. So our contact information is on the this slide, and you'll be able to access it after.
Yeah, and I also want to add about the research symposium. It's awesome. It was my first time presenting my research, and I was on a team of fantastic RAs that I work with, and we won a prize. It was completely unexpected. And you don't have to present your thesis research. It doesn't have to be your independent research. If you want to participate in the undergraduate research symposium, talk to a professor and say, I'd like to participate in some research and present some research. And they'll definitely be supportive of that. So it doesn't have to be your thesis. And it's a great thing to put on your resume. And it's also just a nice experience. So thanks,
It's a super awesome experience for sure.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it this spring.
So these are the resources that you're welcome to look up there. So it's Assure, and then the UROP, and then CURE, which is an associate of Assure.
And both UROP and CURE offer funding opportunities when you go to conduct your independent research. And I got a fellowship from UROP, and it was really great.
So these are the, oops, sorry, I don't know if you can hear the background noise, my bad. These are the virtual open hours for the current term. And so as you can see on the left, and then me on the bottom right, these are the Assure undergrad research, the undergraduates. And so if you want, advice from a peer mentor, another undergrad, that'll be our perspective. And then if you want the perspective of a faculty member or staff, then the Lewis and Holly, and then Carl and Lanch are also great resources for you. They're faculty advisors that are associated with UROP, Assure, CURE, all that fun stuff. And we're all here to help you guys formulate either, you're getting involved in research. We could help you with your resume, as stated. We could help you with your cover letter, just basically forming those connections, and then making sure you are broadcasting yourself. So we're basically here to help, and it's not like, we don't want you guys to think that it's like, we don't want you to think that we're like faculty or their faculty, like hard, just like super mean, aggressive. No, like basically you could come with any question. No question is dumb. If you don't know how to approach a professor, and if they're intimidating, totally come to office hours, because it's very common. I had that struggle too. I was like, oh, I don't want to talk to so-and-so. I'm intimidated. So basically just, we're always welcome. You're always welcome. Oh yeah, so it's a little tricky this term because our office hours are online. So the way to access our office hours is to go to that URL and then just sign into your UO email, and then find Assure, and then it'll be on Microsoft Teams. This is important. So it's not on Zoom like everything. I think all classes are on Zoom. This is on Microsoft Teams, and it's going to enable you to either chat or video call or just call. So it's definitely accessible for the student. So whatever you're comfortable with, we'll do it.
And the instructions and the hot link to sign into Microsoft Teams and connect to Assure is in the chat.
Yeah, so this is basically like, this is broadcasting the undergrads, our peer office hours. And so I'm not technically like a human phys advisor. Madeline isn't technically a psychology advisor. However, I could give you advice on, you know, getting into research lab of any sort of lab. Although human physiology is my major, I do have more knowledge and a little bit more skill-based, like learning stuff from the human phys major, but definitely not reserved for just human phys students. So if you are a different major other than human phys, you could definitely come to my office hours, and that goes for all of the other office hours for sure. And so a little bit more about the office hours. We can help you, like I said, with different labs, like, you know, trying to find your labs, try to find a PI that you could work with, work together well with. Sorry, my cat is like on my lap. And as we've stated, we could also help you with your resumes, cover letters, emails to professors, and job apps for research labs. Specifically with the resume and cover letters, I think after, I mean, I'm a senior, so after, you know, about 4 to 5 years here, I've definitely had some experience writing my resumes. And like Tilly said, I think it's really beneficial to start early. And by starting early, it's basically just making little edits after every term, just so you know the different, just so you could remember the different experiences that you've had. And it'll really help you in the long run, because I didn't do that and I regretted it. So, learning experience. And then most importantly, we could help you with searching and preparing for research opportunities and different interviews that you may come across during your time as an undergrad. Do y'all have any discussion questions for me? Because I did do a research lab for about a year, and Tilly is currently in a lab, right, Tilly?
Yep, I've been
So we're
in a lab
definitely,
since my freshman year.
yeah, that's awesome.
If you guys don't have any questions right now, Julius, is there anything you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, totally. So like I said about the resume, I think it's super important to have your resume and cover letter, what is it called? Like, basically they interact with one another by like basically having a conversation between each other and then complimenting each other. But for me specifically, I want to be in the medical field, so the job applications I've had to do haven't really asked me to write a cover letter until recently. And this particular cover letter asked me to emphasize one aspect, just one aspect of my experience as an undergrad. And so it wasn't like a full-on story, it was just very specific. And I thought that was really interesting, because it just kind of emphasizes that cover letters could come in all shapes and forms. And definitely read the prompts that your employers ask you or your PI asks, and just pay attention, because those little details could go a long way.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about how there's not one resume that you're going to come up with. And is there a time that you've changed your resume to fit the job? I think that we talked about that before.
Yeah, so like for me specifically, I was interested in being a scribe, a medical scribe. So on my mission statement, I specifically wrote that I had the objective of being a medical scribe. But for, you know, that template resume, I had to switch it up, you know, to be part of Assure. Why would I have a medical scribe for the Assure resume? So I switched up that resume and I made it more Assure friendly. And then I submitted a different, I submitted a different resume for the Assure application, for example. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I definitely changed around my resume for the Assure application too, to be the workshop coordinator. I added a lot of research experience and a lot of leadership experience within that research experience. But that wasn't a super salient part of my resume. If you had just like looked at and you saw
Yeah.
my research experience. So I did a skill summary about my leadership experience and while in my research experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the cover letters and the resumes are definitely, they're very malleable between each other, and they're also extremely flexible regarding the content that you put. I mean, is anyone here a STEM major? We got no STEMs. I mean, I only see 2 nodders, so I'm assuming no STEMs. I mean, as far as the STEM field goes, we don't really get asked for cover letters that much, but does your field, Tilly?
Oh, yes. So I'm a Spanish and linguistics major, and I did have to write many a cover letters. Yeah. we did.
Wow. I can't relate. Okay, so does anyone have any questions now that we've had some sort of discussion?
Hi, question on the use of I within the resume itself. Is it a new trend to start using that now?
I personally, I put I on all the resumes and cover all the resumes that I've written, because if not, it seems in my perspective, it seems like you're reading bullet points without the bullet points. So that's the only reason that I put I, and also it makes it more personal. Tilly, do you have any?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question because you don't see I's in CVs a lot, but you definitely, I think you see I's in resumes, and I've never written a resume that doesn't use I. And so I think it's totally fine to use I in resumes, and maybe less in CVs when you're writing out a really long list of accomplishments. I think that's a good question.
I think regarding questions for the resume, I think a lot of students get tripped up on whether they should add their GPA or not. And I think adding your GPA is only needed, in my opinion, when your PI or your employer wants it, because you're disclosing information that they need compared to just disclosing information just to disclose it. So unless you want to, that's totally up to you, but it's not needed unless they specifically state it.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, any more questions, I really encourage you to go see our peer mentors and go see Julissa for resume and cover letter advice and any other research related questions. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes if you want to ask questions in more private setting. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for coming. And we hope you have a good finals week and week 9 and 10.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.